Thank you so much for coming. You were far better behaved. I was listening backstage. You're very, very sedate and well-behaved audience. Better behaved than those crazies the other side of campus in the dining hall. Did any of you get a chance to? Any of you get a chance to see that? No? Sort of 300 lesbians, Muslims, goodness knows what else. Haters of freedom. Dreadful, dreadful people. How are you? Thank you for having me. Welcome to the Dangerous Faggot Tour. I'm Judge Milo, the most fabulous Supreme Justice in America. Friends and foes simply... What? I think I look quite nice as a judge. I was work on press secretary first. We'll get there. Friends and foes simply call me Milo, not because my name is particularly difficult to pronounce, but because I'm really famous. Liberals are afraid to say hard names, of course, because if they get them wrong, it's racist, and if they get them right, it's cultural appropriation. But I'm one of life's givers, you know, so I try to make their lives as easy as possible. Today is Yom Kippur, which is the Jewish Day of Atonement. Jews everywhere are apologizing for their sins. I'm blessed to only be half Jewish because there isn't enough time in the world. I don't think the good Lord, as omnipotent as he is, has time to listen to all of it. Now, the main reason that I do a lot of this is to annoy crazies on the very far left, but also on the very far right. Stormfront and the Daily Stormer, all of these anti-Semitic and white supremacist sites don't like me very much either. They love to hate me, in fact. I'm convinced that Stormfront is a creation of the CIA. There's a theory floating around some friends of mine that, you know, that the Daily Stormer and all of these white supremacist blogs are sort of false flags of some kind. They're just too funny to be real white supremacists. No, they are. This is a picture. They illustrated a post about me with my drag alter ego, Ivana Wall. Outside, well, you know where that is. I think the headline was something like, dangerous kike faggot trying to integrate, I don't know, anyway. No, I'm in the happy position now of being protested just as enthusiastically from the right as I am from the left, which probably means I'm getting something right or everything wrong. I'm having a lovely tour of the South, by the way, although I do sort of suspect that this country music thing you have is sort of a plan from the Clintons to get me to commit suicide. I've tried to like it. This is some shit just don't travel. And outside the United States, we just don't get it. We don't get it at all. Okay, I'm having huge turnouts, massive halls. What did we do? We sold out a 1,200-seater at Louisiana State University in 48 hours. An amazing thing. 5 times bigger than the crowd Hillary got on the same night. No, it's true. It's true. Gives you some indication of the enthusiasm gap between our side of the fence and theirs. Now, I don't know if people are just showing up to see if it's going to be some sort of horrible car crash performance. That's why you watch NASCAR or Hillary Clinton speeches. But we are filling halls. Now, let's grab the subject firmly by the pussy. Grab the subject at hand firmly by the pussy. We are officially about 30 days away from an election. How many people here are Donald Trump supporters? A couple. Not many, though. Not many. Who are the other people like? Who do you guys like up here? No, but really? Oh, well, I hope to change your mind, or at least hope to encourage you to vote in a pragmatic direction this evening, because we are here to talk about something very serious. We've already seen how the Clinton campaign operates, the smears, the lies. The tape they released to Donald Trump, which wasn't particularly pleasant, let's be honest, I don't think is going to affect the polls in any meaningful way. The only people who were shocked that Donald Trump talks like a blue-collar guy were his fellow Republicans, these sort of quivering geriatrics who claim to be offended by bad language, but are perfectly happy, it seems, if Glenn Beck has anything to go by, to allow a woman into the White House who will change your country forever, and for the worse, change your country into little more than another fading Western nation. A lot of you on edge, you're asking, you know, what's going to happen next? What tape have they got next? There are rumors going around that there are worse tapes. I don't know, and I don't think it matters too much, and I think you have an obligation to vote for Donald Trump regardless, and I'm going to tell you why this evening. For some Trump supporters, especially young people who haven't experienced dirty elections, this is a shaky time. Because Trump has a sort of unholy coalition against him. He's got the Clintons, he's got Silicon Valley, he's got the media, he's got pretty much everybody. We know from WikiLeaks today, the New York Times gave Bill Clinton interview questions ahead of time. We know that the New York Times has a reporter called Maggie Haberman. And Maggie Haberman, who used to be a Politico, was described by the Clinton campaign as a friendly journalist who has teed up stories for them and never disappoints. And the Washington Post was giving friendly heads-ups to members of the Clinton campaign if their names appeared in stories. This is a sort of closeness that Republicans have to fight every election and hope that they can overcome. In other words, the American media is lying, mendacious, and corrupt, and frankly, they deserve to burn. And they have burned this election. They have really suffered as a result of Donald Trump. Now, on Trump's side of the equation, we've got the alt-right, we've got classical liberals, we've got libertarians, we've got some disaffected liberals. Now, we've also got some Bernie bros. My goal tonight is to pull us all back together. My goal is to encourage you to save America. If not to make it great again, at least to save it as it currently exists. The subject I want to talk to you about is the Supreme Court. Now, you know who this lady is. She's lovely. She's lovely. She's not lovely. I would like you, as an American, I come here as a sort of warning from Europe, I would like you to keep America strong and keep America free, because it matters to all of us that America does well. As a European, I am terrified by the prospect that America might fall to the forces of authoritarianism, nannying, language policing, pearl clutching, because it is just another kind of totalitarianism. And I'm terrified by the idea of more women like this dictating the future of your country. I'm going to explain to you a little bit today why. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking that the scattering of Trump protesters here are thinking, well, don't we want a wall? Don't we want Mexico to pay for it? Some of you probably do. Don't want to fix trade? Well, some of you probably do. Don't we want to stop Apple, refusing to pay taxes? Some of you probably do. And lots of Donald Trump supporters are coming out with those goals in mind, filling huge stadiums. Many of Donald Trump's supporters have very sincere anxieties and concerns. They really like his policies. But there's only one thing that actually matters in this election. There's really only one thing that you have to think about, and that is the Supreme Court. Now, most of you will know what it is and what it does. Even if you are uncomfortable with some of Trump's rhetoric, even if you're uncomfortable with the language that he uses, the Supreme Court is the body in this nation that determines your country's future direction more than anything else. It's far more important than any individual election. If Hillary's elected, she could appoint up to 4 Supreme Court justices. Any so-called conservative who recognizes this and still won't vote for Trump does not deserve to call themselves a conservative. They should hand in their resignation to the Republican Party. And I'll explain to you a little bit tonight about why I think that, and why it's so important, and what will happen if Hillary Clinton gets control of the Supreme Court. Now, these Beltway conservatives, the people that you read in National Review and whatever, they don't particularly care about America. It sounds like a sort of bold and awful thing to say about them. But it's very clear from their behavior that they don't. They don't care about jobs, they care about their influence, they care about maintaining their position. And they clearly don't care about the Supreme Court, because if they did, they wouldn't be letting Hillary Clinton wander into the White House unopposed, as far as they're concerned. They only care about themselves. And here's what they want for the Supreme Court. They want more sleepiness. Poor dear Ruth. Did you see her? Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's off. She's off somewhere else. These are the most powerful people in America. I hope it was a pleasant nap. Perhaps she was dreaming about an alternate universe America where the Second Amendment doesn't exist, which is something she clearly wants. Well, Hillary Clinton is going to bring in a lot of other people who want that too. The founders of this country never believed it would be ruled by nannies in black robes. The Federalist Papers, which were written to explain the Constitution, call the judicial branch the least dangerous bit of government. Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 78 wrote that the judiciary has no influence over either the sword or the purse, no direction either of the strength or the wealth of society, and it can take no active resolution whatsoever. It may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment. Hamilton imagines that judges will be objective, that they will be rational, exercising judgment on what the Constitution actually says. It's a world away from what leftist, activist judges want the Supreme Court to be. You don't hear anything in these papers about relativism or diversity, which claim to be the mothers of social peace and loving kindness, but in our day mean ramming boys out of school for perceived social and sexual infractions from kangaroo courts, where they're presumed guilty if a girl screams rape or any black person calls racist. And you don't hear anything from Hamilton either about twisting Title IX into a sort of club with which to beat down boys' wrestling teams or break down the door to the girls' locker room for grown men in dresses to join them. Now, not every judge or every government official has exercised objective and perfect judgment, but at least the West aspires to that noble goal in its judiciaries. The left, on the other hand, especially the lesbianic feminist left, they are, I'm sorry, stomps up and down in their sensible shoes on the idea that the goal of unbiased judges is to be ruled by the law, not the latest social justice fad. As far as I'm concerned, if the goal is to have good judges with clear judgment, the first question should be, are you or have you ever been a feminist? It should be a disqualifying admission. Hamilton's writings in the Federalist Papers don't reflect the reality of the court even today or any time in recent memory. They might have done relatively recently, and that was when Justice Scalia was alive. The Supreme Court we know today is best described by the recently departed Antonin Scalia, who said that the practice of constitutional revision by an unelected committee of 9, always accompanied by extravagant praise of liberty, robs the people of the most important liberty they assert in the Declaration of Independence and won in the Revolution of 1776, the freedom to govern themselves. Scalia was a national treasure and one of my favorite American political figures, along with Reagan and now, of course, Daddy. You're just going to have to come round to it. You're going to have to get used to it. I'm sorry. This block of the audience, with whom I am already disappointed, you're just going to have to get over it. He was an originalist, which means that he believes the Constitution was intended to say exactly what it does say, and it doesn't go out of its way to address the petty whims of trannies, homos, bronies, and whatever other special interest group is trending on Twitter this week. And in fact, Scalia said specifically that it is not up to the courts to invent new minorities to get special protections. It's like he's my spirit animal. Of course, Scalia wasn't a dangerous faggot. He had 9 children. It's difficult to imagine looking at him now, but he was a much better Catholic than I am. He was a great man, and I think his loss is going to be felt in America for some time. His quote about the unelected committee of 9 brings me to the key point this evening. The left seeks power at all times. Power over you. Power to decide what you can do, what you can say, what you can be. It wants to control every aspect of your lives. It is profoundly antithetical, profoundly hostile to freedom. And it doesn't like you very much. It doesn't like people like you very much. It despises the idea you should be left alone to be responsible for your own lives. It thinks that it knows best. Now, this is precisely the kind of gerrymandering with people's private lives that the Supreme Court was designed to protect against. The left has contempt for the old Western ideas that we should all play by the same rules. To hell with your cis, hetero-patriarchal lies about the rules, the left says. Social progress is more important. And to achieve social progress, they have to control what you do, what you say, what you think, and pesky things like the Constitution just get in the way. They also, of course, want to control what you can shoot, which is possibly their worst offense. So they're going to toss aside the original plain meaning of the Constitution and impose whatever they like on you, and they've been doing that on the court for some time already. And don't complain if it's one policy today and another entirely contradictory policy tomorrow, or if there's one policy for their favored group and an entirely different one for you. Logic and fairness cannot stand in the way of social justice. Reason and consistency do not mean anything to the left. They will yell at you to stop oppressing them at the same moment that their boot is on your neck. Justice Sonia Sotomayor famously said, "I would hope that a wise Latina woman with the richness of her experiences would more often than not reach a better conclusion." A better conclusion than what? This is what you can look forward to if Hillary's elected president. Wacky left-wing identity politics in the highest office of the land, the highest court. The Supreme Court has had a conservative advantage, of course. Well, at least it did, since Nixon appointed 4 justices to the court. I'm warming to Nixon, who my friend Roger Stone admires deeply. He set up a long-running conservative court, and frankly, Watergate doesn't make a blip compared to the crimes of the Clintons. I think Nixon's one of the most unfairly judged presidents in history. The reason the Supreme Court is a central issue this election is that what Nixon achieved is at risk. The next president's likely to select quite a few judges, possibly 4, possibly even more than that. And that will shape the court for decades, just like it did for Nixon. There are currently 8 justices, and they often deadlock 4-4. Now, as you can imagine, the progressives always vote together. The conservatives, who have a better understanding of individualism and liberty and are freer spirits, split off sometimes. They don't always vote together. When the court is deadlocked 4-4, no precedent is set, so the decision of the lower court stands. Justice Kennedy, like Hillary Clinton, swings both ways, and has voted with the liberals a number of times. But the thing about the Supreme Court, and this is what you've got to understand, this is why it matters so much in this election, they're really, really fucking old. They're really old. Older than the average age of a Fox News viewer, if you can believe that. Take a look at what I mean. This is a list of the average ages of people on the Supreme Court. Dear old Ruth, 83. Anthony Kennedy, the swinger, 80. Stephen Breyer, 78. Clarence Thomas, 68. Now, the average age of retirement for a Supreme Court justice is 79. So you can see what will happen, even if the next president only gets 1 term, as she surely would. Clarence Thomas is apparently desperate to go. Clarence Thomas is, a hero of mine. Somebody who's never allowed his skin color to affect his judgment and his reason and his grasp of logic and fairness and due process. But he wants to go, and rumor has it he's only sticking on because of this. Because he's worried about it. So we could lose 4, we could lose even 5. I mean, these guys are not young. Anything could happen. If Clinton's elected, you could be looking at 6-3 or even 7-2 majorities on the Supreme Court. It's terrifying, but there is an alternative to this horrible dystopia. Make a little confession to you. In my dorky teenage years, I used to be a fan of Warhammer. Does anyone know what that is? Yeah, there's some dorks in the audience. Those little figurines that you paint and then you do tabletop gaming, and there's some video games as well. He always gets painted as these amazing. I think that's a Space Marine, isn't it? Yeah. All right. Anyway, now Trump, for all of his excesses, Donald Trump has released a list for the Supreme Court, which has received universal acclaim from conservatives, from Republicans. It's a very serious, very sensible list. It's a list he's obviously taken a lot of time to think about, and as he's obviously solicited a lot of advice and opinions on it. And it is a robustly Republican list. Hillary, of course, has not said who she's going to appoint. We don't know if it would be Obama. Unlikely, since they fucking hate each other. Bill Clinton, but then Ruth is a little older than the women he normally prefers, so he might turn it down. It's hard to be specific about names, but we do know that her picks are going to come from the regressive left. This is a woman who panders to feminism, panders to the excesses of Black Lives Matter, the race baiting, Black Lives Matter racists in particular. Hillary Clinton's court would trample over the Constitution and over your and over your rights. Let's talk about some of the ways this might happen. If you think that forcing schools to allow grown men into little girls' bathrooms is as bad as it will get, you haven't seen anything yet. And since Halloween is coming up, I want to dangle before you some even scarier prospects for the Supreme Court. First of all, and this is very clear and very obvious, the First Amendment is at serious risk in a Hillary Clinton under a Hillary Clinton presidency because of the Hillary Clinton Supreme Court. Firstly, the so-called fairness doctrine. Political speech will have to be fair, as defined by liberals. We'll expect conservative talk radio to go. Clinton appointees in the FCC or some other branch of government will be the ones who get to decide what's fair. So it's goodbye to most conservative media. Perhaps the biggest change will be the realm of so-called hate speech. Hate speech is one of those things that the left has invented to beat people when it doesn't have arguments. It mischaracterizes ridicule and criticism and argument as abuse and harassment. That's how I lost my Twitter account. She does look like a man. I'm sorry. I'm not going to stop saying it. She does look like a man. Talentless cunt. One of the ways in which liberals will seek to clamp down on free speech, and this is really the most important thing, the First Amendment really is the most important thing you should be preoccupied with, is in the realm of hate speech. Hate speech is something the left has invented, and it defines it pretty much as anything we don't like, anything that hurts our feelings, and anything that might be remotely described as libertarian or Republican, particularly if you have a sense of humor. Remember the Supreme Court, when it considered obscenity and pornography, Justice Potter Stewart said, "I know it when I see it." Well, the left sees hate speech everywhere. It sees racism everywhere, sexism everywhere, homophobia everywhere, including and especially where it does not exist. The definition of hate speech in a Clinton Supreme Court would make the UN jealous. Now, next to religious freedoms, any hope of religious groups to receive fair treatment in America will be totally snuffed out by a liberal Supreme Court. They'll be required to comply with federal programs like Obamacare, so churches will have to marry whatever tranny orgy stumbles in at 3 a.m. demanding to be married, and probably have to make pizza for them as well. Every religion will suffer, with the possible exception, of course, of Islam, which the left loves because they hate the West just as much as the feminists do. In fact, I have a theory about this. I've been exploring this in my talks. I'm not sure the left really cares that much about Islam. I think that they hate it because they like it because they know that conservatives hate it. Because they know that conservatives recognize it as the most obvious threat to freedom, threat to safety, threat to the Western way of life. Conservatives have always identified the Middle East as the #1 potential problem on the horizon for freedom and democracy. So it seems to me the left, in its sort of endless vindictiveness and pettiness and meanness, has simply chosen Islam as friends because the right doesn't like them very much. The problem, of course, being that the left's insane identity politics crusade has led to rather a problem, and the problem is Orlando. The gays and Muslims don't like each other very much. This is a revelation to no one except the media, politicians, and celebrities. Everybody else is relatively aware of this fact. But the left will sort of try to pander to them both at once. Well, I'm sorry, but it's going to be the gays that lose, because the left has decided, for reasons that will probably never work out, that they would rather have friends in Raqqa than in Chelsea. Now, the Second Amendment is a liberal's most hated part of the Constitution. They loathe it, which says a lot because they hate the whole document. But the liberal court will strive to weaken the Second Amendment with the eventual goal of removing it altogether. Expect previous pro-gun decisions to be reversed, and the federal government and liberal state governments to work closely to hamper gun ownership. The Second Amendment, as everybody in this room knows, is what safeguards the First. So it gives you the right to protect yourself against overweening government, and it is the backup plan you have for when free speech fails. But they do want to take it away from you. Make no mistake. Everything Obama has done in office demonstrates this quite clearly, and everything Hillary Clinton says demonstrates too that the sorts of people that she would elect to the Supreme Court have no respect whatsoever for the Second Amendment. Now the fourth, I'm going to skip over some because some of them just aren't that interesting. The Fourth Amendment protects you from illegal search and seizure. Now under a liberal court, this amendment is toast. As affirmative consent laws show, lefties want to be inside the bedroom as well as the boardroom these days. Under a president that doesn't think twice about spying on his own citizens, do you really think private property is going to be a concern under his successor? The Fifth Amendment. Fifth Amendment protects you from incriminating yourself. This is not an amendment I take advantage of very often. The Fifth Amendment, now plenty of Clinton people have taken the Fifth. But Clinton, it's good for them. Identity politics of the court, of course, are going to play into this. You know, if you're a Muslim aide to Hillary Clinton, they'll never come for you. You'll be able to plead the fifth in whatever situation you want. You don't have to, of course, incriminate yourself when your guilt is presumed if you are a straight white male. If you do anything wrong, slight, anything you might do on a college campus that could be interpreted is in any way even disrespectful towards other people, you won't even need to plead the fifth. Any changes to the Fourth or Fifth Amendment won't affect, of course, Hillary or her friends. As we learned in this election, there is one set of laws for them and another for the rest of America. Which takes me on to the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment promises you a speedy and fair trial. So not at all like the Title IX injustices you have on campuses, but the campus justice system is what liberals want to expand to the rest of the justice system. A system based on feelings and fighting so-called systemic oppression instead of due process. It's scary to imagine gulags of political prisoners who aren't even aware of what they're charged with, but that is the situation on college campuses under Title IX laws, with boys who are not able to call witnesses, to defend themselves, or even to hear the charges made against them before a university decides if they can be expelled or not. That is the kind of justice that prevails when social justice. Of course, if you put social in front of anything, it sort of inverts the meaning, you know, social welfare, social housing, social justice. This is the kind of justice that prevails when you put the word social in front of it. It may seem far-fetched, but there's no reason to suppose America is immune from this stuff. Now, the 9th and 10th Amendments preserve freedoms for the states and citizens of the United States. That doesn't sound hugely compatible with the liberal version of America. Globalism requires strong federal powers. They want to be able to control you from Washington, so the states can't do pesky things like protect religious freedoms. Well, this down here in the South, you have a keener understanding of the importance of states' rights, more than perhaps in any other area of the country. And it goes without saying that anything that gives the federal government more power is a huge negative for basically anyone sane. The more power the federal government has, the more it's able to stick its nose into things that don't concern it, the worse your life gets. The GOP establishment, and especially the Never Trump movement, believes that Hillary could be elected and America remain in good shape. They believe Congress can fight her legislation and defend America's values with their votes, but this is a Congress that couldn't defund Obamacare. And even if that were the case, the real threat of a Hillary Clinton White House is, as I say, her Supreme Court picks, which will affect America for decades to come. It is an open and shut case. There is no way anyone can argue that Hillary Clinton will not make 4 and perhaps even more picks for the Supreme Court that will radically alter the trajectory of this country, radically alter the destination that we're all headed to in the West, which is the flourishing of people based on the ideals on which this country was founded. Liberty, freedom, property rights, capitalism, prosperity, and the ability for anybody to be, say, and do anything they want. That is what is at stake at this next election. America, as you know it, will be gone. And I come to you as a sort of warning from Europe, because you're going to end up about as free and about as strong as Germany or France if you lose those central and core parts of your identity as Americans. I can't stress this enough. If you're wondering how to persuade your friends about this election, all I can tell you is that you might not think that, and indeed, you know, it looks like many of you in the audience don't, you might not think that Donald Trump is a particularly nice guy. You might not like the way he speaks about whoever. You might find him all number of things. But if what he's indicated about the Supreme Court, that his picks, if he sticks to those picks, what he's indicated he will do about the Supreme Court holds, you really have no other moral option. This is not so much today an entreaty for you to wake up one day and be a huge fan of Daddy, as I am. It's asking for a little much. But it is a warning, because I want you to understand what can happen with countries that don't preserve those essential freedoms. Now, in Europe, we've never even had a Second Amendment, which is why the government is able to coercively force citizens to do almost anything. Nottingham in England, the police are now suggesting that if you make misogynistic comments, you can be hauled in front of a judge. In Scotland, or north of England, in the United Kingdom, In Scotland, I'm just letting you know, because I know that you guys don't have a great grasp of European geography. No, I mean, like, if I lived in America, I wouldn't give a shit either. In Scotland, the police can, they sent a tweet out, actually. The Scottish police sent a tweet out, and it said, watch out if you're being offensive on the internet, because we're watching. I mean, this is unheard of. This is unthinkable in America, but it is coming. So that's it. That's why I think you have a very difficult but a very important choice to make at the next election, and why I think that you should be very angry with a lot of the people who describe themselves as Republicans in this country, very angry with a lot of people who claim to be conservatives, who are prepared to see Hillary Clinton enter the White House and prepared for this country to lose all of the things that make it great. This is the greatest country in the history of human civilization. It is the best place we've come up with as a species so far. This election is at risk. This election, all of that could be lost. So I entreat you to, you people, the bad people in the audience, I entreat you to hold your nose and vote for Daddy. Those of you who are already fans, get yourself down to the voting booth. And make sure that some of the things that I've described this evening don't happen. Because if they do, America will lose its position in the world as the great defender of faith, of freedom, of democracy. It will lose its position in the world as really the country you all admire. Britain didn't invent any of the values that America is founded on, but it spread them more effectively throughout the rest of the world than any other country. America is the highest and most perfect expression of those values. It is a country based on all of the good stuff that we've come up with as a species so far. It is the place you would want to be born if you didn't have a choice, and everywhere that doesn't have American values isn't a particularly nice place to be. It's very important to preserve that. It's very important to fight back every generation the forces who wish to control what you say and what you do. People who want to take your guns away, people who want to take away due process, the rule of law, fairness, and the people who want to take away your right to say, do, and be whatever you please. There are 300 lunatics in the dining hall this evening who don't agree with me. They think that conservative points of view or differing views on certain medical issues, or frustration with race baiting and pandering to the worst kinds of misandrist, man-hating, third-wave feminists, constitute language that should be against the law. Well, I don't believe any kind of speech should be against the law, particularly not in America. So I urge you to think carefully at the next election. Thank you for listening, and I'd be very happy to take questions. Thank you. Thank you. Now, there is normally a system for this. I don't know what the system is. Is there a little... Oh, there we go. Yeah. So if you come and queue up here, if you have questions, I'd be very happy to take some.
Hey, Milo. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
My name's Ethan. For the record, I first supported Rubio. I was never Trumper for a while, and I've already filled out my absentee ballot.
Druggy.
I've already filled out my absentee ballot for Trump, though, and everybody down the ticket.
Splendid.
Okay? So... And I also implore everybody else, even if you don't want to vote for Trump, at least fill out down the ticket. Do not make that mistake, seriously. We can't lose the legislature, too. My question is, again, I already told you I've supported Trump in this election, but I do have concerns with some of his rhetoric, and I want to hear your opinion. You just talked about the Second Amendment. In the first debate, he said that he supports the no-fly, no-buy bill, which completely slaps the Second Amendment and the Fifth Amendment in the face. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, nobody said he was a perfect candidate, and he just seemed to say a variety of things on issues in broadly the right direction. What he has said, I think, strongly on terrorism and on gun control, sometimes he goes a little far for my tastes. It is, however, very clear from the broad direction of his comments, which is the best we can hope to interpret from, that he does care about the Second Amendment and that he will look after it. I don't think anybody really seriously disagrees that there is a problem with vetting in this country. Clearly, some of the wrong people are getting their hands on firearms. The problem is not guns. You know, every citizen who is of sound mind ought to be able to take advantage of the Second Amendment. But I think what Trump has said publicly is simply that we should be a bit careful about whether they're on terrorist list or whether they are not quite right in the head. I think most people probably agree that the vetting procedures are not working. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to sort of be a disaster for gun rights. I don't really see that realistically happening. He's taken a pretty meandering route on abortion, which I think he's now settled into a good place. I think he's been much sounder on gun control.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey Milo, my name is Alexa. I wanted to thank you for coming. Everything you said was wildly refreshing, and I love that you speak your mind when we're surrounded by liberals who are always trying to tell us to shut up.
Well, they can't tell me to shut up.
So my question specifically is about when you address feminism and how it's largely associated with liberals, and me
Yes.
being a proud woman and a proud Republican.
Yes.
I would like to ask you, what's the best way to differentiate me, myself, as someone who believes in gender equality from a
Yes.
lot of feminists who are pro-women over men's rights?
Well, when they do the surveys, they always come out the same. Women describe themselves overwhelmingly in favor of gender equality. Well, I say overwhelmingly. Only 85% of American women believe that women that believe in gender equality. I don't know what the other 15 are thinking. But 85%, which is pretty high for a survey, believe in that. But only 18% describe themselves as feminists. I think they've correctly identified that feminism has moved on from being a movement advocating the gender equality and for equal rights for women, and moved into something and become something else, become something unpleasant. I don't think you're at any risk proudly saying I am not a feminist, because by doing so these days, all you're really communicating to people is that you don't hate men. I don't think that anybody is going to be horrified these days by you saying you're not a feminist, because most women agree with you. In Britain, where we are far more sensible about these things, just 7% of women describe themselves as feminist. I don't really know anybody who doesn't believe in gender equality, and I don't know why anybody feels the need to explain to people that they do. I would like to encourage people to give up on what I think has become a vindictive, mean, man-hating, and dishonest movement, a movement that shares conspiracy theories, that misleads people, and that drives the sexes apart. I would encourage you to be bold. Just say, no, I'm not a feminist, because feminism used to be something wonderful, something noble, something you could be proud of. I mean, America has a great history with this stuff. Women in this country are... Women in America are probably the most privileged group in the history of civilization. They have more advantages when they're born in this country than anybody else anywhere else in the world. Feminism denies that and spends most of its time attacking men on the basis of lies. Lies like the wage gap and lies like campus rape culture. I don't think you're going to cost yourself anything by just telling people, based on what feminism has become, I'm not a feminist.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello, Milo. My name is Will. I've been waiting for you to come here since like midsummer, and I'm really happy you made it.
Thanks.
My question has to do with your friend Ruth Bader Ginsburg. On Monday, she said that what Colin Kaepernick has done and has started is stupid, and she doesn't agree with it.
Yes.
And the left has kind of jumped on her. The progressives have said maybe she's never been as great as they thought she was.
Mm-hmm.
That splintering of the left, do you think it's possible, as the splintering on the right has happened with the Trump campaign?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, they always eat their own, because ultimately, when you've beaten everybody down, policed their language, when you have found every real example of sexism, racism, homophobia you possibly can, you go looking for things that don't exist, like microaggressions, and you start turning on one another. Sort of Black Lives Matter, jumping on stage with Bernie and whatever. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day, as they say, and it was good of Ginsburg to say that. It's nice that she does still have a sensible bone in her body. But I don't read very much into the left coming for her on that. I don't think the left is going to splinter on issues like that. I think the left is going to splinter in the same way the right has. I think they're going to splinter across, sort of Sanders-Clinton lines. There is a huge dissatisfaction with the status quo on the left. That, a lot has changed in the last 10 years. People now understand, as it was difficult to wrap your head around this for a while, but people now understand that the political left can be just as spiteful, mean, selfish, and hateful as anybody on the right, which is why I think it was clever and important of Trump to say, as he did in the debate, which he won so comprehensively the other night, that Hillary Clinton had hate in her heart, or whatever expression it was. The left does not have a monopoly on kindness anymore. And it's very clear there's a sort of institutional, bank-funded, say one thing in public, say one thing in private kind of Democrat politics, which Hillary Clinton represents. And there's a more honest and vibrant sort of socialism that Bernie Sanders does. I quite like to. I wish we'd had a Sanders-Trump race, actually, because it would have been a real contest over something. It would have been people who really had who had very radically different visions of the world. But I think that's the way the left is going to splinter. The left is going to splinter according to the sort of institutional nannies, the language police, the big business-backed and Muslim-pandering Hillary Clintons, and the more rambunctious socialist types like Sanders.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Hello.
Hello, Milo. My name is John, and I'd first like to congratulate you on being one of the deplorables.
Well, thank you.
And,
Very proud to be deplorable.
And
I should have called it the deplorable faggot tour. It's so much of a better name. So much better. I was like a month late. I'd already had the bus wrapped.
Well, I wanted to get your opinion on what you think of Hillary first going off and saying Pepe is a meme of hate, and then officially being declared a meme of hate by the ADL, and how conservative and libertarian-minded people could push back against that politically correct
All I
culture.
can say is I'm so glad that the Southern Poverty Law Center has finally identified the real cause of racial tension in this country. It's not bad schools, it's not bad laws, it's not policing, it's nothing. It's a cartoon frog. It's so sad and so pathetic that these people have to fixate on internet memes to try to smear kind of, young, dissident, mischievous people, like young voters. I would take it as a compliment. If you're one of those young libertarians, or cultural libertarians, or classical liberals, or Trump supporters, or alt-righters, wherever in the spectrum you sit in the sort of Pepe ecosystem. What am I doing with my life? Wherever you sit in the Pepe ecosystem, you should take it as a compliment, because it's what the left does when they run out of arguments, is they start name-calling. So Out Magazine did a really nice profile of me a couple of weeks ago. It was a very nuanced, sensible profile, and the left were outraged that anybody would dare to write a fair profile of me. It's like, how dare you give this guy a fair hearing? Why aren't you just calling him a racist? So, like we would. I mean, what is going on? So the whole gay press wheeled out this like Milo Yiannopoulos white supremacist. I'm like, what? What? Garbage and malarkey. And they did the same thing with this with Pepe, and the reason they do it is that stop it. I have to try to retain a semblance of respectability whilst talking about green cartoon anime frogs. This is what Donald Trump has reduced our politics to, and half of me loves it, and the other half gets a sensible audience is like this, and I'm like, no, I think you should take it as a compliment, because it means that they've resorted to name-calling, which is what they do when they're losing. And continue to wear it, continue to tweet it, continue to talk about it, because the more you do, the more you demonstrate how preposterous they are. And it was, I was perfectly happy to have stories up at Breitbart underscoring all of this ridiculous coverage from the gay press that was calling me a white supremacist, because, of course, I knew, lo and behold, 2 weeks later, the actual white supremacists come out and call me a race-mixing kike faggot and say they don't like me at all. Just stick with your principles and stick with your memes, and you'll be fine. Hi, hello.
Hello. I was wondering, my name is Ariza, by the way. As a fellow European, I was asking, don't you think that there's a better way to establish democracy? Like, do you really think that America is the best democracy that we've ever had?
In the history of human civilization, yes.
But something like, I don't know, like Scandinavian countries maybe. Don't you think that they have better type of democracy than we do?
Yeah, people sometimes say this, and I think that Norway, for instance, doesn't really have an economy because there's such abundant natural resources. It doesn't make much sense to praise them in economic terms. But these countries are socialist. These are countries where there are higher property taxes for houses that have sea views. These are countries that control every aspect of your life and will excise you from public service and from the public square if you don't subscribe to a narrow set of allowable opinions. The reason Sweden, which is often held up as an example of good governance in a well-ordered country, as I think your question was suggesting. I mean, it is only a democracy just about, vaguely. It's technically a democracy. But in Sweden, the reason this country's got itself into so much trouble, the reason Sweden has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of immigrants that it cannot cope with, is the stultifying political correctness that takes hold in socialist countries. And the fact that if you are a Swede, and you, until very, very recently, and even now if if you work in the arts or anywhere, if you even broached the subject of immigration, you would be castigated as a racist, fired from your job, and cast out of polite society. It's difficult for me, hearing people praise these supposedly wonderful Scandinavian nations, to look out on them and to look at the narrow range of acceptable opinions when you compare it to somewhere like America, and praise them in any way whatsoever. So I have to tell you no. I can't think of a better example than America of a country that is still, by and large, pretty free. Scandinavia is in a real mess, and it's in a real mess precisely because it has not. Its voters haven't voted for freedom; they voted for stultifying control from their governments. There was probably a little while when Scandinavian countries were doing okay, but they're not anymore. And America, by and large, is still all right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Milo.
Hi.
One of your many appealing qualities is how
Do go on.
is how incredibly researched you all are in all of your viewpoints, how you back up everything you say with facts and studies.
I try.
There's
a butt coming, isn't there? Can you hear it?
Yeah, there are many figures that do have contrasting viewpoints that you do. Sam Harris, John Oliver,
Yeah.
a vertically challenged man named Ben Shapiro. So my question is, what current political figures or other advocates out there that do have contrasting viewpoints from you that you respect as being credible?
Well, the problem is there aren't very many clever lefties left, you know? They've sort of forgotten how to argue over the last 30 years. I mean, it's difficult. One of the reasons there's so much political tension in this country is people talk past each other. The right tends to talk with reason, logic, facts, and history, and the left tends to talk with feelings, grievance, and victimhood. These are different languages. It's like trying to dance about architecture. I mean, it's like, there's so little that these people have in common that it's very difficult to sort of say, well, I just don't respect that vision of the universe. I don't respect a model of politics or of social policy or of anything else that is based on feelings instead of facts. I don't respect the point of view that privileges subjective grievance mongering and the indulgence of victimhood, conspiracy theories, fake history, and name calling and language policing. And these are not just the tools, but also the philosophies of the left. I don't respect them. I don't respect any of them. And there are people that I disagree. I mean, people that I love and admire, like Christopher Hitchens. I don't agree with him on anything. I wish he'd never written the book about God. I think this is by far his worst book, second only to his terrible book about Mother Teresa. There are people I admire hugely. I don't agree with on everything. But if you're asking me if there's somebody really on the other side of the political divide who I think is great, I really don't. I mean, look at the quality that you have on the right. I mean, we joke about Ben, but Ben is one of the sharpest minds in media in this country. He's an incredibly fucking smart guy. Really fucked it up with Trump, and now his career's gone. But he's a very smart man. We don't agree on everything. But where's the Ben Shapiro of the left? Where's the Milo of the left? Where's the where are any the intellectual titans? Where's the Thomas Sowell of the left? They don't have them. They just don't. And that wasn't always the case. But I can't honestly tell you, and I wish this were different, because we are at our best when we have strong adversaries, when we have opponents who are height of their powers, because it keeps you honest, keeps you on your toes, makes you the best that you can be. But I'm getting really lazy because there just aren't enough good people on the left anymore. And there's a real problem with talent on the left. You know, I see a lot of young Republican, you know, gifted writers, artists, musicians. Nobody will give them the time of day because they have the wrong politics. The left has the opposite problem. It has odious, untalented people like Amy Schumer and Lena Dunham, who we are required to love, though they have no redeeming qualities whatsoever and nothing interesting to say about anything. And the left has a real talent problem. So I'm waffling because I don't know. I can't answer your question. Sorry.
Hi, Milo. Thanks
Hi.
for coming.
Thank
so I heard you and Martin Shkreli were considering buying 4chan.
Well, not together, but I think we've both expressed interest in it.
So how do you feel about Shkreli? And if you buy 4chan, are you going to place ads to monetize it? Because some users are concerned that advertisers will lead to censorship. Or do you merely plan on being 4chan's sugar daddy?
This is the problem of being gay and getting to 30. You have to start becoming the sugar daddy. And so you're on dates, and you notice that people are kind of pulling the same tricks you used to when the check arrives. They kind of go like this, you know. It's like, fuck, I used to do that when I was thinner. I think the only way that it would work for me, as I think you've probably read, I do have somebody who's interested in funding it. Funding my purchase of it. My philosophy of 4chan, which is a delicate, fragile subculture on the internet, which has very, very wonderful things and very, very terrible things. But you don't get the very wonderful things without the terrible things. It is really, truly free speech central. The only way that it would work for me is if I could come to an agreed purchase price with him, and that I had for at least the foreseeable future whatever it costs to run, guaranteed, so that I don't have to advertise on it at all.
Thank you very much.
Not a huge amount to run. I think somebody estimated it was about $6,000 or $7,000 a month. I mean, you know.
Hi, Milo.
Hi.
So my question is kind of looking forward past this election. If, God forbid, Trump doesn't win, and we are forced to succumb to the scourge that is globalism, what do we do moving forward?
Oh, I don't know. No, this is why it's so important that you all fucking vote for him, because you're done. You're done. What Hillary Clinton's going to do to schools, you know, Title IX is nothing compared to what's coming. What she's going to do to the police, pandering to Black Lives Matter, pandering to this organization that celebrates the death of police officers, the passes she gives them, and that all of the people around her give them. It's disgusting. It's morally abhorrent. To say nothing of the serious stuff that's going to happen in the Supreme Court. And I gave a talk last night about ICANN, which is a much more technical subject, but the control of the internet that America has always kept so free, has always been so great, that is being handed off to Syria and Russia and China. I think if Trump doesn't win this election, you know, he's going to, look, I'm under no illusions. It's going to be a colorful White House. But with Hillary Clinton in it, you don't have a country anymore. You don't really have America anymore, because the erosion of protections, the First and Second Amendment, in my view, will be irreversible. And what she'll do to the Supreme Court, which is, as I say, the only thing that matters, will be irreversible for generations. It's not just about what she can do in 4 years, it's about what they will do in 20. So I don't know. I quake. I quake to imagine a world in 20 years' time with a weak and divided and broken America, with China and Russia on the rise. I don't think you have any option but to elect him.
Thank you.
Hello?
Hi, so my question is, with so many sources reporting that net immigration from Mexico is at zero, or at least very close to zero, why is it that so many people, including Trump, are making such a big deal out of it?
Well, the best explanation of this that I've heard is we do know, for instance, that the murders in some states are, 30% of the murders are committed by illegal aliens. We do know that huge percentages of really very serious crimes are committed by people who don't have any right to be here. And I don't know that it's so much for Trump or for me a question of net migration. It's not really about numbers. It's about who you want in. Nobody is suggesting that America should close its borders. I wouldn't advise that as a sort of observer from Europe, and I don't think anybody in
Isn't
America
that what
wants that.
Trump's plan is with the wall, is to close that border?
Well, I think he wants to secure the border so that he can decide who America lets in and who it doesn't. If net migration from Mexico is zero, it might be in America's interest that it stays zero forever, because it might be better to get doctors and lawyers and accountants and teachers from Australia or from the UK or from Canada. What's happening at the moment is that pretty much anybody can sneak in if they're persistent enough, and you've got people committing horrendous crimes who just shouldn't be here at all. And for me, I'm a fan of the Australian point system, which, if you don't know what that means, it's sort of basically Australia decides every year, what do we need, right? We're short on doctors, we've got tons of teachers, so we're not going to let teachers in. We're short on doctors, we're short on, I don't know, plumbers even. So they just allocate that number of people, and they come in, they pay taxes, all the rest of it. But the border is rock solid secure. And nobody calls Australia racist. They just get in what the country needs. This country, America, is the country that everybody wants to go to. It is the country everybody wants to get to. And you're sort of insulated from a lot of the worst migration because you're not contiguous with Africa or the Middle East. Because if you were, you'd be in the position Germany is in. But there's nothing wrong and nothing racist with saying, well, here's a country we have, we're short on this stuff, we've got too much of this stuff, and here's a bunch of crime, so here's what we're going to do to resolve that situation. For me, I don't think, putting a halt to Muslim immigration, as a gay man, I'm quite comfortable with that. Building a wall in Mexico, on the border with Mexico to make sure that anybody who comes in or goes out is supposed to be doing that and is entitled to do so, doesn't strike me as a problem. And having a system where a country like America that everybody wants to get to, because it is the best country, gets to choose who it takes. I mean, you have a choice. You're not under some moral obligation to provide a home and pay for the families of people who don't belong here, who just happen to share a border with you. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You are under a moral obligation to look after the people who already live here. And if they need doctors, get them from wherever the best doctors are. And if the best doctors are in Mexico City, get them from there. They're probably not. But if they are, they're probably not, then take them from there. If, on the other hand, they're in Germany or the UK or Australia, take them from there. You have a choice. You're America. You don't just have to accept whatever bleeds over the border because you can't police your own country properly. And that, as far as I read it, as I understand it, is all that Trump's proposing. And I don't know that net migration from Mexico is hugely relevant to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. It's been a more serious talk than normal. It's a very serious subject, and I was told that Vanderbilt was one of those schools where people would like to hear something a bit meatier. So thank you very much for listening to me. If you want to come and say hi afterwards, I think somebody will tell you when and where that's going to happen. But thank you very much for having me. Cheers.